Hello, welcome back. They say everyone has a love language, a way they express and understand affection. But for some, there's also a sex language, a deeper, more intimate form of connection that reflects emotional, physical, and even spiritual intimacy. Joni Lamb once publicly referenced this with a mix of sincerity and awkwardness, speaking candidly about the role of sex in marriage. It was part of her broader commitment to authenticity, even in the often stiff world of Christian broadcasting. But today, that same openness has pulled her into the spotlight in a very different way, as her carefully curated public image begins to unravel. What once seemed like an inspiring testimony of love, redemption, and faith has now turned into a storm of rumors, tension, and heartbreak. For years, Joni and her first husband, Marcus Lamb, were seen as the face of Daystar, a Christian television network that reached millions. They projected the image of unity, strong values, and deep faith. After Marcus's passing, Joni's supporters cheered her on when she found love again with Doug Weiss, a prominent Christian marriage counselor. Their marriage was celebrated as a symbol of healing and second chances. But behind the scenes, it wasn't the fairy tale many had believed. The first signs of trouble were subtle. Doug appeared less frequently at Joni's side during events where he had once been a constant presence. Photos and social media posts that once displayed shared affection became sparse. Body language between them seemed tense. Smiles didn't. Reach the eyes, and physical closeness gave way to emotional distance. Insiders began whispering about friction and possible disagreements. At first, no one wanted to believe it. But the silence from both Joni and Doug, especially on platforms where they'd once shared so freely, only made the rumors grow. Some began to suggest that Doug struggled with the constant public scrutiny that came with being Joni's husband. Though respected in his own field, he was now under a magnifying glass. Any misstep could become tabloid fodder, and there were whispers that Doug might be hiding financial issues related to his counseling business, disputes, investigations, and unresolved lawsuits that threatened to expose cracks in his reputation. Others believed that he and Joni were clashing over the direction of Daystar, with Doug allegedly wanting a more central role in the ministry. It was said that Joni resisted, wanting to preserve the legacy she and Marcus had built together. Then came an even more personal allegation, conversations and messages between Joni and Doug that raised eyebrows. There were claims of sexually charged texts, not necessarily inappropriate, but shocking enough to trigger confusion and anxiety among those close to Joni. One friend, overwhelmed by what was being shared, admitted it caused panic attacks. The context was murky, but the emotional toll was clear. These weren't salacious revelations. Rather, they reflected a deeper emotional disconnect and confusion about what the marriage had become. Eventually, the rumors were confirmed in part by a dramatic turn of events. Joni and Doug had separated. Quietly, Doug moved out of their shared home. Publicly, Joni continued her ministry, but with a notable absence, her husband was no longer by her side. Soon after, word of a divorce surfaced, sending shockwaves through the Christian community. Fans who had embraced their love story now felt blindsided. How had something that appeared so strong come undone so quickly? The announcement of their split was met with widespread sadness, confusion, and, inevitably, judgment. For Joni, this wasn't just a private heartbreak, it was a public reckoning. As someone who had ministered to others about the power of faith and love, she now faced the humiliation of another failed marriage. Supporters expressed sympathy, while critics questioned her decisions. For Doug, the criticism cut even deeper. As a marriage counselor, his very credibility was at stake. How could a man who guided others through marital struggles not hold his own relationship together? To make matters worse, legal rumors began to surface. Some reports suggested Doug was under investigation for financial misconduct tied to his counseling practice. The allegations included possible misuse of funds, irregular business dealings, and lawsuits from former clients. Though no official charges were confirmed, the implications were serious. The silence from Doug's side only deepened the suspicion. His sudden disappearance from public engagements and the apparent cancellation of speaking events raised eyebrows. Something, it seemed, was brewing. Joni, already reeling from the emotional toll of the divorce, now had to manage the fallout from Doug's rumored legal troubles. She had no part in his business dealings, but as his wife, now ex-wife, and a high-profile figure, she couldn't avoid the ripple effect. Daystar's reputation, her personal integrity, and her mental well-being were all under threat. Some speculated that Joni had discovered these issues before the divorce, prompting her to separate from Doug before things got worse. Others believed she had been in the dark until the truth could no longer be hidden. Meanwhile, Doug and his supporters maintained his innocence. They believed he was the target of a smear campaign, possibly by rivals or disgruntled former clients. But the pressure kept building. Churches began distancing themselves from him. Speaking invites were rescinded. His name, once associated with healing and guidance, now trailed suspicion and controversy. Joni's own circle, her children in particular, rallied around her. They had reportedly been wary of Doug from the beginning, unsure if anyone could ever truly fill Marcus's shoes. Some sources suggested that Joni's remarriage had caused tension within the family, that perhaps it had happened too soon, before deep emotional wounds had properly healed. The revelation of Doug's alleged past missteps only added to their concerns. As the dust settled, media coverage continued to speculate about what had really gone wrong. Was it legal trouble? Was it personal betrayal? Was the relationship ever as strong as it appeared, or had it been held together more by image than true compatibility? Some accused Joni of being naive, of moving on too quickly after Marcus. Others defended her, pointing out that everyone deserves a second chance at love, even if it doesn't work out. In public, Joni kept her composure. She released statements, focused on her faith, on God's plan, and on staying committed to her ministry. She never directly addressed the most scandalous claims, perhaps out of wisdom, or perhaps because she was still trying to understand it all herself. Privately, those close to her said she was deeply hurt, confused, and questioning her own judgment. It wasn't just the loss of a marriage, it was the loss of what that marriage symbolized: hope, restoration, and a future she believed in. As for Doug, the legal questions remained unresolved. Nothing had been officially confirmed, but whispers persisted. Were authorities investigating him? Would charges be filed? If so, how would that affect not just his career, but the broader community he had served for decades? Every day that passed without answers only heightened the anxiety.